Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Radha Govinda Dev ki jai. Kali Yuga Dharma Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Ambe Mata ki jai. Welcome to another session for our Navaratri series. Today is day 3 of the Navaratri festival, celebrating the goddess Chandraghanta. And on this day, while worshipping the divine goddess, it is advised to wear white, which is why I'm wearing white today. So if you notice, there have been colors that are governing each of the days of this festival, representing the worship of this divine goddess. The first day was gray, the next day was orange for Brahmacharini, and today is white. So it's amazing that even just dressing, adorning oneself can be a form of celebrating these festivals and a form of worshiping these divine personalities. It is not surprising that we worship the goddess during a time when the seasons change, as she is very well known for bringing about transformations within our lives. So as we go on, we'll see how our minds transform, how our hearts transform, all of these different things. So without further ado, we will sing Jai Radha Madhava to bring our minds to where we long to be, that sacred place where all of these pastimes abound, where we have unlimited potential and an unlimited place to serve the divine couple. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari. Jashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chari. Jashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Jai Radha Madhava Radhe Govinda Jaya Radhe Govinda Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda Dev ki jai Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. All glories to that spiritual abode that we are always longing for. In the pages of Sri Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Narada Muni is on a quest to find the greatest recipient of the Lord's mercy. And while looking, he goes to see Lord Shiva himself. Lord Shiva begins to extol the glories of so many devotees. And he says that the residents of Vaikuntha receive so much mercy, but his wife, Parvati, steps in. And she always says, you cannot possibly begin to speak about those devotees of my Lord without speaking about the goddess Lakshmi, without speaking about the divine goddess of whom I am an expansion. We say that, and we hear from our many Vaishnav teachers, that Sri Radha is the source of all feminine divine aspects. She is the source of all goddesses of fortune, all Lakshmis. And then Parvati Devi prides herself in being an expansion of that very same goddess. So she makes a very, very specific point about speaking and honoring these goddesses and the divine forms of the goddess. So she's very, very particular about how the feminine aspect of the divine is honored and how she should be honored. And Lord Shiva and Narada Muni, rightly so, they begin to extol the glories of the consorts of the Supreme Lord. So we are and have been observing this festival for 2 days. This is our third day. Tomorrow, day 4, the color is red, honoring the goddess Kushmanda Devi, which we'll hear about her tomorrow. We'll hear some wonderful things in glorification of her. In the past, when I was kind of compiling and trying to give honor and homage to these divine goddesses through writing, through finding out these stories, I was always kind of put on a constraint for space because I was trying to upload them into small pictures on Instagram or somehow uploading them into a story for Facebook. But now I get to expand on all of these pastimes because I get to either read them aloud or I get to share them with all of you. So I'm really excited and really happy that there's this format now where I get to expand all of the things that I didn't have the space for before. So today is honoring the goddess Chandraghanta. She is a very beautiful goddess. She rides on a lion, symbolizing her heroic nature. She has weapons in her hands, often a trident among others, symbolizing not just the fact that she is the reigning goddess of this material creation, which is full of 3 modes of material nature. So that trident symbolizes that she is the mistress and the subduer of all of these threefold modes of material nature. And also she is the subduer of all the miseries of this material nature, being the presiding deity of all of this realm. but she is also ready to give protection to those that worship her with love and devotion. So, as I was saying, it is not surprising that we worship the goddess during times when the seasons change. There are 2 seasons for Navaratri. There is a spring one, and there is a fall, an autumn Navaratri. And both of those summon the transformational power and protection of this divine goddess. And sometimes these transformations can seem kind of scary within our lives. And if we take note, some of the forms of the divine goddess seem outwardly a little bit scary. We see Bajrakali. We see so many forms of hers. Even within the form of Chandraghanta, she is often worshipped as Chandi or Chamunda, Chamundeshwari. And so these forms are said to be a little bit frightening. But who are they frightening for? They're not frightening for the devotees. They're not frightening for those whose hearts are filled with devotion. They are frightening for those who go against the devotees. So, as we see the divine, heroic, terrific, awesome form of Lord Nrsimha, as a person who grew up hearing these glorious stories of the Lord, looking at these pictures of the Lord as half man, half lion, filled with blood, and there's intestines wrapped around his neck, I never felt afraid. I actually felt the most overwhelming sense of protection, because he was protecting the devotee Prahlad. Similarly, within the worship practices of Shaktism, we see that there are female counterparts for so many of these divine forms. So we see that there is a form, Narsinghi, a female form, which also has the head of a lion, but the body of a wonderful goddess. So some of these forms can seem astounding. They can seem astonishing, but not frightening for the devotees. Not frightening for those who are on the path of bhakti, the path of loving devotion, a path which she herself takes upon the task of protecting. She is always available and ready to protect our hearts, to clear out obstacles. She is the mother of Ganesh, who removes obstacles himself. She is such a divine, compassionate mother for those who are not trying to be controllers of her own realm. For those who are simply trying to serve with a sincere heart, she can clear out all the obstacles on the path to devotion. She can usher us closer to Govinda Dev. She can usher us toward a life filled with happiness and bliss. And what is that ultimate happiness? That ultimate happiness is the act of serving those divine personalities. We find that, and it was said within Srimad Bhagavatam, that no living entity can be devoid of all desire. We all will have a desire to do something, say something, worship something. But if we give that attention to politics, we find that there is misery. If we give that worship and that idolization to sports stars, to movie stars, to celebrities, we find that our hearts don't find the same kind of satisfaction. And we don't get the same kind of reciprocation. We can meditate on a celebrity for decades, and that celebrity still will not know us. That celebrity still will not understand what they mean to us. And that celebrity still has the potential to disappoint us gravely, to make mistakes, to falter, to be deceitful. But this is the magic of bhakti yoga. This is the magic of the path of devotion. Once we give our worship, because that's what it is really, once we give our meditation, once we take out the time to celebrate these divine celebrities, these personalities who are really worthy of our worship, our adoration, all of our idolizing potential, when we give it to those divine personalities who are really worthy of it, this is the magic. We come closer to them and they come closer to us. There is a divine reciprocation that is not to be gained through any other kind of worship. When we address these divine personalities and run to them for protection, they can actually give us that protection. They can be present at a moment's notice before us when we really need them in our lives. They can make miracles in our lives. And conclusively, they will know just what they mean to us deep within our hearts. So whereas we can give our respect and incredible worship to a material person, they have their limitations. But these divine presences, these divine personalities, they don't operate under those limitations. They can become present within our lives and they can gift us with the best happiness. Happiness that is eternal. Happiness that goes beyond this one life, this one existence, this one material creation. So this is why we will use any and every excuse to glorify such divine personalities. And this is why we run to glorify the Divine Mother, who is always a friend, always a well-wisher, always a guiding mentor along this spiritual path. And we will hear within the coming days about how she yearns for this path of devotion as well. But today, I feel like sometimes when we were in school, we would come and the teacher or professor would say, there's so much to cover today. There's so much packed in here. That's what I feel like it is for today. There's so much packed in for today's katha. So without further ado, let us invoke the divine presence of Lord Vasudeva. Let us chant our magical incantation, which will instantly transport us to a realm of infinite possibility, a realm of the greatest happiness, and a realm where these divine personalities can become present and speak to us once again through their pastimes. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And now we are ready to begin. We left off yesterday where Parvati Devi is a young maiden. She has gone through a transformation of her own. Previously, we hear that she had taken the form of Sati and had given up that form so that she would no longer be connected to Daksha, the progenitor, the Prajapati, her own father, and a father of many of the race of men and others. She no longer wanted to be connected with him because of his enviousness towards Lord Shiva, the Lord of her very own heart, her eternal consort. So she gives up that body. She is later born as the son of Queen Mena and Mount Himavan. She is born as Parvati, the daughter of Parvatraj, and she is known as Shaila Putri. We talked about how she had gone to do many, many years of penance and austerities to gain Lord Shiva as her consort once again. And so she is celebrated as the goddess Brahmacharini, known for her great determination, patience, enthusiasm, and her all-encompassing devotion. However, as we see, after Sati had given up her body, Lord Shiva decided to engage in rigorous austerities. He no longer wanted to be concerned with this mortal realm, with this material realm filled with other people and things. He wanted to give himself to another emotion, to get rid of his grief. But that did not stop many demons from attacking. That did not stop the universe from coming under the attack of so many evil-minded beings. We have so many demons: Mahishasur, Shumba and Nishumba, Jamba, Tarkasur. So many demons arise, and they are troubling the many demigods. So much so that the demigods have to take various forms. They have to leave their kingdom in the heavens. They have to go and take the form of celestial monkeys just to go into hiding. I have tried to pull from Skanda Purana and other places to be able to somehow weave together these stories and these pastimes. So a lot of these stories in the coming days will be from Skanda Purana, from other places that I have then adapted into one narrative for the purpose of these festivals. So I hope and pray that you will bear with me, and that the goddess herself will bless me and forgive any mistakes that I know I am sure to make along the way. Please know that as I'm working with these translations of Skanda Purana that I have found, this is just one way that these stories have taken place. We've spoken about how all of these Vedic histories, these are histories, have full conviction that these are not just stories from another time. These are absolute histories that have occurred. And as such, these histories are eternal, and they are full of potency. So they have not only happened once, but they've happened again and again and again. So in many of these histories, sometimes the details change. So although I am telling these histories in one way, the details may have happened in another way. So if you have heard of them in a different way, don't feel disheartened, thinking that there is only one way that the goddess will have advented herself. In this way, it's just one instance in the many, many, many eternal ways that these divine personalities have created their pastimes. So don't feel disheartened if I haven't been able to capture all of the details, because there are so many. Please know that anything and everything is possible within the divine realms that we are now entering. So, Lord Brahma once described that at the dawn of creation, at the beginning of his very own existence, he glimpsed before him a wonderful personality in dual form. He saw the miraculous form of Ardhanarishwara, that beautiful person, then separated into a male and female part. Prior to this, that male and female were joined in one dual form, but now they separated into two. This male and female part, they became the origins of male and female forms throughout all of creation. And it is said that these two forms became the basis of Lord Brahma's male and female creations. Later, the female form, which was none other than Shakti herself, came to be known as Sati. although ever existing. Lord Brahma urged Daksha to adopt Sati and care for her as his own daughter. Later, it was Lord Brahma who again urged Daksha to perform the wedding ceremony of Sati and Lord Shiva. Lord Brahma then employed Nisha, the goddess of sleep, to transfer this wonderful form of Adi Shakti into the body of Mena, the queen of Himavan, so that she would give birth to Parvati Devi. So after Sati quits her body, it is Lord Brahma who employs the goddess of sleep. So there are so many people who make these wonderful dramas happen. We were speaking about Yoga Maya, who is none other than the goddess herself in her most complete form within the divine realm of Vrindavan. And she knows the innermost heart and mind of Govinda. And she acts as a divine director in the pastimes of Govinda, in the pastimes of Radha Govinda. But now we see in these material pastimes, there are so many directors and there are so many different players that take part in these pastimes. So I feel that as we give glory to these pastimes, as we perform our heartfelt worship of these wonderful pastimes, somehow we also take part. We also become necessary for these wonderful pastimes. Just somehow trying to celebrate these wonderful occurrences. So now Parvati has taken her birth. Lord Shiva, who was doing meditation in various places, changes his place of residence to an ashram in the Himalayas. Why? Somehow, being pulled by the very idea of this goddess who has now been born, being pulled by this innate presence of his own consort, he changes his residence to the Himalayas. And so he takes up the place of residence in an ashram, and he begins to perform his austerities once again, still desiring to be cut off from all of these material designations and these material relationships. So Lord Shiva is suffering from heartbreak. He's kind of been burned in the past, and now he feels as though, that's it. I no longer want to be a part of all of this. And so he begins to meditate, but he still cannot separate himself from the call of his goddess. And so he resides where she resides. So it is said that as a small child, many people would go and offer worship to Lord Shiva. They would try to assist him in his meditation. And Parvati was no exception. Her father brought her to this place. And he tells her, this is Mahadev. And she is engaged in picking flowers and bringing water to that holy place where Mahadev himself is meditating. And through this, of course, she sets her sights on Mahadev, and she determines that there is no one else who would ever be able to capture her heart, even at a very, very young age. Once, Narada Muni, while traveling, went to see Himavan Raj, who had a daughter named Parvati. Narada thought of this young girl's previous identity and immediately felt called to offer her his respects. He wanted to offer respects to the great mother and the divine source of femininity, courage, and strength. At present, she appeared just like any other young girl, and the sage curbed his desire to offer his full obeisances when he saw her. We can imagine just how sweet little Parvati must have looked. As he sat with the mountain king, the Queen Mena and their daughter arrived to see Narada Muni and the king. Being shy and not knowing the sage, Parvati Devi went and sought the shelter of her father's lap. She cast furtive glances at the sage while trying to hide her intense curiosity. Knowing her heart and mind, Himavan told his daughter, "My dearest, go and offer your obeisances to the sage. By his blessings, you will get a wonderful husband." It was at this prompting that the young goddess perked up. Constantly feeling the yearning in her heart for her counterpart, she was always thinking of who she might obtain as her companion and soulmate. Even from the time she was very young, she had been thinking of whom she would marry, for a moment being overcome with shyness that her heart was so blatantly on display, and that others would come to know the innermost hopes and wishes that she held there. She simply covered her face with her veil, unable to move. Finally, Narada coaxed her out of her shyness, saying, "My dear, I have a jeweled toy that I will give you. I have been keeping it for a very long time." Latching on to the jeweled toy as a suitable excuse, the sweet girl left the lap of her father and stepped tentatively closer to the sage. As Narada looked at the great goddess masquerading as a young girl, he felt great reverence swell within his heart. Drawing the small child near to him, he touched her head lightly with his right hand. She looked up at him with clear, innocent eyes, and his own eyes filled with awe as tears gathered in the corners. This one young girl would come to be worshipped throughout all the realms. And here she played just like any other innocent child. Truly the ways of the divine personalities were wondrous and blissful. Composing himself after a moment, Narada said, "Oh, wonderful girl, dear Kumari, I cannot think of anything in the world good enough to offer you as a blessing. You tell me, what do you think would be suitable for you?" And it was true. The goddess who had the power to bless and protect all of creation, how could he possibly bless her? After a moment, she lowered her eyes back to the ground, a small smile gracing her beautiful, childlike face. The queen, however, was eager to know of the princess's future, and she spoke up. "O great sage, you know everything, past, present, and future. I would like to know what kind of husband my daughter will obtain." Narada chuckled. He had come to see the one who was the consort of the greatest being in all of creation, and here her parents wondered about her future. They worried about her. Smiling for another heartbeat, the sage sighed happily and said, "Her husband will be one who was not born, who has evil characteristics, roams naked, and is quite furious by nature, and who has absolutely no possessions." Narada Muni, indeed, he sang with joy of the glories of her future husband. The queen was speechless, her mouth opening and closing in indignation. Maharaj Himavan, he coughed and choked. Finally, he found his voice enough to say, "What are you saying, Muniraj? This world is so mysterious that even great souls cannot understand it. My dear Narada, your statements have brought me immense grief. How could my daughter's husband be a person the likes of whom you have described? How can I give my sweetly bred daughter over to such a person? Who is this that you are describing?" Nodding emphatically to support her husband, the queen could only point and look expectantly at Narada, awaiting his answer, hoping he would repair their dashed dreams. Narada chuckled again, his eyes lighting up with delight. "My dear king and queen, don't be sad on what should be the happiest of occasions. Your daughter, in her former birth, was the wife of Lord Shiva, Sati. She has appeared again to be his eternal consort. Please believe that I have not spoken incorrectly. Her husband is one who is not born because he is eternal. Although his activities do not always appear to be auspicious, he himself is Shiva, an abode of auspiciousness, and he purifies all that he comes in contact with. Although thoroughly renounced, he bestows unlimited wealth upon his followers. He is the great Lord Shiva himself. It is he who will become your son-in-law and the husband of your daughter. Do not be so aggrieved. Sighing and smiling with relief, Himavan and Mena glanced at one another, and then at their child, who seemed to be glowing with pride and joy on hearing her future. Although Lord Shiva couldn't quite explain it, something about the presence of this young girl called to him. However, submerged as he was in his grief, he resolved to ignore that call and continued to absorb himself in meditation. So what would be the thing that could bring him out of this meditation? All of these different demons, like Shumba and Nishumba and Mahishasur, Tarkasur, Jamba, they were prophesied to be killed by either Lord Shiva himself, a great goddess, a child who was only 7 days old. But who were these people? Who were these personalities? Somehow, all of the gods gathered together and they knew somehow Lord Shiva was the key to figuring this whole mystery out. But if there was need for a goddess, if there was need for a child, that meant that there was a need for Lord Shiva to take a consort once again. There was a need for Lord Shiva to bring balance back into the workings of the universe. However, he was detached from everything. What would bring this balance back? Indra employed Kamadev himself to somehow see if he could bring and restore balance to the universe. Once, Kamadev, Cupid, the god of love and desire, tried to distract the great yogi, Lord Shiva, in order to break his constant meditation. Some say that this mission came at the prayers of Parvati Devi herself, even though a maiden at the time. And some say that it was Indra who employed Kamadev on behalf of Parvati. Not just Parvati, but all the gods were awaiting the union of Parvati and Lord Shiva. They were being troubled, and their grief knew no bounds. Unfortunately, Lord Shiva, still reeling from the loss of his consort Sati, was completely uninterested in taking another, and Parvati Devi was at a loss for how to catch the attention of Lord Shiva, who was so dedicated to his life of meditation. She had been trying for so long. She had been steeped in meditation. As we heard yesterday, Brahmacharini would neither eat nor sleep. She would not take any drink. She would take nothing. Nothing would sway her from her determination. However, it seemed as though she could not catch the attention of Lord Shiva, the greatest of all yogis, the greatest of meditators. Cupid, along with his wife Rati, and many of their celestial dancers, including Vasant, the personification of the entire spring season, traveled to the snowy mountains of the Himalayas, the new kingdom of Lord Shiva. They brought spring to the frigid abode of Lord Shiva. Flowers rained from the sky like a sweet romantic shower, while Lord Shiva sat on his tiger skin, steeped in trance, his eyes closed, his back, head, neck all aligned. His followers, like his bull carrier Nandi, stared in wonder as Cupid and Rati began to dance. Accompanied by a host of apsaras, the celestial dancers of the heavens, women who were created as expressions of beauty and refinement, the entire party tried to bring the mood of romance to the stark and bare ashram dwelling of Lord Shiva. Kamadev used every tactic within his arsenal designed to ensnare the mind and coerce one's consciousness over to a mood of tenderness. Lord Shiva remained unaffected. He sat as still as a statue, looking much like the snow-covered mountain on which he lived, while the god of love himself tried his hardest to seduce his mind and break his meditation. Some say that Lord Shiva at one point wandered all over the three worlds trying to get away from Cupid. However, wherever he turned, he could not be free of Kamadev's company. Finally, returning to his ashram, he attempted once again to engage in his austerities. There was an orchestra of emotion anywhere one's mind turned. The eyes were entranced by the dancing of Cupid and his cohorts. The gentle flower shower added a riot of bright color and intoxicating fragrance to the scene. The sounds of the anklets chumming and belts and bangles ringing mixed with the sounds of the spring birds and was a festival for the ears. The soft touch of a gentle spring breeze added fuel to the flame of the activities, and Kamadev was sure that no one would have been able to resist this onslaught. If only the staunch god would open his eyes. Cupid was beginning to feel restless. No one had ever resisted such an onslaught as this before, let alone one of this magnitude. How could he claim dominion over all matters of the heart and desire if he was unable to motivate the god of destruction toward more amorous thoughts? And what would become of the goddess Parvati? What would happen if Lord Shiva was not reunited with his consort? When Sati immolated herself with the use of yogic fire, Lord Shiva had been inconsolable. Destruction and chaos had followed, and the entire universe had been terrified of what the god would do next in his anger. Since then, although sedated by meditation, the god remained unstable, and the rest of the realms were on edge. Everyone knew that the god was capable of anything, but reuniting him with his consort might be able to bring balance back to Lord Shiva and would not only calm Parvati Devi but the universal realms as well. Thinking that the universe depended on this, Cupid resolved that he could not allow his mission to fail. With the welfare of the universe thrumming through his mind, Cupid summoned his bow, the most powerful weapon in his possession. His arrows were powerful enough to turn the most rigid men, ascetics, and celestials into love-lorn, morose, infatuated slaves to their hearts and innermost desires. Kamadev pulled a beautiful flower-tipped arrow from the quiver that materialized by his side as he gripped the bow and felt its familiar weight in its hand. The arrow glistened in the light of the atmosphere. Its shaft looked as though it were made of rainbows and pure light. Sometimes it was a deep purple, other times it was a vibrant green. The colors shifted and changed constantly, and the arrow almost sparkled in the snow-lit atmosphere of the Himalayas. This was his most potent weapon. If one swift arrow to the heart of Lord Shiva didn't work, then Kamadev was sure nothing would. Kamadev placed the arrow against the string of the bow and pulled the string back to its full length, the large golden bow arching to almost a complete half circle due to the tension. The feathers of the arrow fluttered against his cheek almost like a lover's caress. Perfect. He took aim, looking straight at the open chest of the celestial who sat unaffected and oblivious on his mountain post. He released the arrow and watched with bated breath as it zoomed through the air, fast as an electric shock and with just as much raw power. Cupid didn't dare so much as blink until his arrow had hit its target. Finally, it was done. The magical flower arrow had reached its target, embedding itself firmly within the chest of Lord Shiva. Then it shimmered and disappeared. Kamadev waited to see how the effect would present itself, but it shouldn't have been long before the stern Lord Shiva would open his eyes. Thick eyelashes fluttered against angular cheeks, which showed the effects of months of intense and uninterrupted austerities. A crease formed in the celestial broad forehead, eyebrows knitting together, and indeed his brilliant and intense eyes opened. But when they did, Kamadev did not see the intense look of desire that he expected. Lord Shiva's eyes were filled with anger. Looking almost as if he had never been so deeply steeped in his meditation as Kamadev thought, his heated gaze focused on Cupid. He looked straight at him, as though he already knew that he was the one who had broken his meditation, as though he had somehow been aware all along, even though he looked as though he was oblivious to the rest of the world. Lord Shiva exhaled. He exhaled a breath filled with fury that had his followers trembling already. His anger reached a quick crescendo, and before anyone had time enough to move or breathe or blink, Lord Shiva opened his third eye between his brows. It was reddish, angry, and blazing like fire. In the space of a heartbeat, Kamadev was burning. Fire licked at him from all sides, and he felt it within him as though it were coming from his very own heart, consuming him from the inside out. He barely had time to cry out. The next moment, the god of love was reduced to a heap of smoking ashes. There were screams of alarm from the Apsaras and the distraught wailing of Kamadev's wife, Rati. The sounds of revelry had come to an abrupt and unfortunate end. Everyone knew that dealing with Lord Shiva could have been dangerous, but no one expected that the god's brand of justice would be quite so swift and final. No one had planned for this. No one had even thought it was possible. Rati beat at her chest in grief and appealed to Lord Shiva, who had lost his own consort once, to please restore her own. My dear Lord, I will not try to dismiss or excuse the offense committed by my husband. Instead, I take full responsibility for it. But you know how impossible it is to live without one's consort. How can I exist? How can I return to our home in the heavens without him? I beg you for mercy, my Lord, I beg you. Please return my husband to me, and we will leave you in peace forever. You are an ocean of mercy, a fountain of compassion. Please excuse us the grave offense that we have committed towards you. Forgive me and return my life. Rati threw herself at Lord Shiva's feet, her utter despair making her bold. Some are asking, what are we reading from? These are adaptations from Skanda Purana and other Puranas that I've woven together as a narrative. Rati threw herself at Lord Shiva's feet, her utter despair making her bold. She roared in her hopelessness and was inconsolable. Finally, Lord Shiva looked at the consort of the god of love and felt sorry for her pitiful condition. Although the god needed to be taught a lesson, he was not the first ascetic whose meditation had been broken, and their austerities and all of the mystic results from them forfeited by Cupid and his revelry. So be it, Devi. Kamadev will live, but for now, he will continue his life in a disembodied form only. He will be pure spirit for now. Although incorporeal, he will continue his dominion over love and desire. He will live in subtlety, continuing on with his acts of desire. Please return to your abode with your husband. Lord Shiva's deep voice was calm and collected as he nodded to the goddess, who pressed her palms together. But before leaving, he gave her one more benediction. When my own Supreme Lord Vasudeva takes his own form as Krishna, your Lord Kamadev will receive form once again as his very own son. At that time, you will be once again joined together with your husband. taking that benediction with her within her heart, Rati leaves the ashram of Lord Shiva. It says that Lord Shiva's anger was so powerful that fire not only burned Kamadev, but it would have burned the entire universe. And so Lord Shiva begins to give that fire to many different places. He gives that fire to spring itself, song, bees, flowers, parks, and naturally beautiful places. So it is said that when one is within those places, the fire of romantic thoughts begins to consume a person. And if one is steeped in distress over their romantic lives, once they enter those places or they hear the sound of bees, they hear songs, they hear beautiful poetry, they hear these songs and they go to beautiful parks and places, they are also consumed by the fire of separation. So the fire of Lord Shiva was twofold. And so he gives that fire to those many different areas within creation, so that it will not burn up the rest of the universe. However, Parvati Devi is now still steeped in meditation, trying to gain the favorable glance of Lord Shiva. After this, Lord Shiva's meditation is broken. And now he can adequately understand the yearning of the heart of this one maiden, who is none other than his eternal consort. Seeing within her heart, he understands that she is meditating on him and him alone. And there appears at that place a brahmachari. So Lord Shiva himself takes the form of a very peculiar brahmachari, and he appears at that spot where Parvati Devi has been performing her meditation. Now, because she is a princess, Parvati was not meditating all alone. She had friends with her that were able to help her and provide her all that she needed while she was meditating, which wasn't much, because she wouldn't eat or sleep. A brahmachari appears there, and he falls into a pond. And he begins to call out for help. Help, help! Oh, I'm drowning! Won't someone help me? Won't someone recognize the principles of religion and help someone who is yearning for their very life? All of the girls rushed there. They said, oh, let us help you. He says, no! I'm a brahmachari. I refuse to take the hand of a woman who is not spiritually advanced. There must be somebody else among you who can help. Now, they should have realized that there was something peculiar about this brahmachari who in one moment was yearning for help, calling out for help, and in the next spurned their help. However, he said, I won't be touched by someone who is not spiritually advanced. There should be somebody else. And so they rush and they tell Parvati Devi, there is a brahmachari. He needs your help. So she rushes to the spot and she offers her left hand. And he says, oh, chi, 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 chi. Shame! I will not grasp the hand that is unclean and impure. The left hand of a woman is considered to be impure. While I see that you are spiritually advanced, offer me your right hand. She says, well, I would like to help you. I don't want to give you my right hand because I have already been promised to Lord Shiva. I have accepted him as my Lord. Only he can take me by my right hand. It is said that once a maiden is grasped by her right hand, she is accepted as belonging to the person that she has chosen as her consort. This is why I've offered you my left hand. If you wish to be saved, please grasp my hand and come out of this river. He says, no, I will only take the right hand. And if you do not save me, then ruin shall come upon you and everyone you love. Thinking of the greater good, Parvati Devi offers her right hand. She helps the brahmachari out of the water. And then she sits down to meditate more. And this is where we pick up with our narrative again. What are you doing? What was most amazing was that the voice was able to infiltrate the many layers of Parvati's meditation. Unable to ignore the question, Parvati slowly opened her eyes. Meditation. Her terse reply was meant to drive away this new companion. What for? Clearly he was not to be deterred. This is the only way to reach Lord Shiva, God of gods, the greatest of all beings. He is my Lord, and I wanted him as my husband. He is the only one with whom I wanted to share my life. And for this reason, I've come here hoping to win his favor. However, now that I have let you touch me, I am now desiring to give up my life. So now I am steeped in greater meditation so that I can give up this body and accept a new one, so that Lord Shiva will accept me. Parvati sighed. She would never catch Mahadev's attention in the midst of these distractions, but she also knew she could not dishonor a guest. She thought to soften her curt response. Please bless me, she requested with a slight smile. Suddenly, he began to laugh, and she began to glare. Foolish girl, go marry someone else. You could marry any one of the devas. You aren't at a loss for beauty. Why Shiva? Matted hair, smeared with ashes, reclusive, uncouth, ill-mannered, and unmanageable. This is what you want? Like shunning jewels for glass or casting off sandalwood in favor of mud, Shiva has nothing and can give you nothing. Enough! Her eyes blazed and her chest heaved with the impact of his insults. Like an injured and angry cobra, she spat venom in the form of innumerable angry glances at the unknown traveler. O Brahman, do not speak like this. One enters the darkest region of ignorance by blaspheming Mahadev. Listen carefully to me so that you can be absolved of all your sins. Lord Shiva is the primeval cause of this world, and so nobody can trace out his origin or family. And this is why he is said to have no family. The entire universe is encompassed in his form, and so he cannot be considered naked. The cemetery is symbolic of this world of birth and death. He resides there out of compassion for the living entities. Dharma has the form of a bull, and so the fact that Lord Shiva rides a bull means that he is the master of all religious principles. Serpents are compared with the defects of material existence. Lord Shiva keeps them under his control. Various religious rituals are his matted hair, and his 3 eyes are the Vedas. It is for these reasons that I worship Lord Shiva and Lord Shiva alone. You should also do so. A person who does not know the greatness of Lord Shiva is definitely the most unfortunate person in the entire universe. My heart is as fixed as the Himalayan mountains from which I was born. What do I care for any of your criticisms? My heart has found its love, and nothing you will say can sway me. Before you ignite my anger, better that I leave this place and your ignorant company. Parvati Devi advised herself and all of her maidservants to block their ears and leave that place. His hand caught the weather-worn cotton cloth that trailed behind her. Whirling on him, she wondered who had the audacity to put his hands on her. If he came any closer, she would give up her life that very instant. She wouldn't be touched by anyone other than her lord. Seething with anger, she faced the traveler, her eyes filled with fury. Her anger died the moment she laid eyes on him. The thick bangles that encircled his ankles, the tiger skin wrapped around his waist, the matted hair that hung down his back, and the rough rudraksha beads that bound his strong arms. She knew it all as intimately as if she knew herself. She had memorized every single detail. She had installed his deity within the temple of her heart. But this deity was now holding the end of her worn cotton sari. Graceful Parvati. Her name had never sounded so beautiful before. His voice was thunder and music. It was the very essence of sound. Where are you going? Were you not just praying for me? Don't be so cruel and forsake me now. He took a step closer. Her heart raced that much faster. You have won, and I am yours. Command me. Ask for anything, and it shall be yours. His words were nectar, his smile intoxicating. She drank him into her full satisfaction, and just as she felt the first flush of a shy blush creep up her cheeks, she lowered her eyes and finally found her voice. Who was she to command him? She wanted to recite 1,000 prayers, but could only utter 2 words. Marry me. Lord Shiva glanced upon her with the greatest compassion and said, So be it, Devi. However, Parvati then says, Well, this is not proper. As a young girl, and you as the master of all, you should approach my parents first. You should then approach them and ask them for my hand in marriage. Lord Shiva advises her to go back to her home and says, Your father had vowed that he would give you in marriage only with a Swayamvara and not otherwise. Let his words not prove false. Go to your father now and urge him to hold this grand Swayamvara. In this way, I will accept you. Parvati returned home much to the delight of her parents, and her father arranged for her great Swayamvara. It was announced throughout the 3 worlds, and the 33 million demigods attended, as did the leaders of all the demons. At the time of the Swayamvara, when all the demigods were in attendance, Lord Shiva playfully assumed the form of a small child on the lap of a man named Jaya. Upon seeing this, the demigods became furious. Indra lifted his thunderbolt to strike the child. Who is this child that can show up at the assembly of all the great kings at a Swayamvara? What is this? This is not a place for a baby. In the same way, other demigods raised their weapons, but Lord Shiva immobilized them all with his mystic potency. They were all frozen like statues by the potency of Lord Shiva. Lord Brahma then went deep into meditation and understood that this child was none other than Shambhu himself. He went and glorified Lord Shiva with many, many prayers. The demigods followed suit, and finally, Lord Shiva took away all of their paralysis. The demons, headed by Tarkasura, became infuriated, however, saying, Who is this Mahadev? We refuse to worship or honor him. At this, Lord Shiva laughed and uttered the 1 syllable, hum, flinging all the demons back to their abodes just by the sound of the utterance of that 1 syllable. This is the power and prowess of Mahadev. Indeed, by the power of Lord Shambhu, everything about the Swayamvara was forgotten. Thereafter, Lord Shiva is said to assume a wonderful form, Sundareshwar Mahadev. And he is joined together in the marriage ceremony of Parvati Devi. So, in many tellings of this story, first, Lord Shiva arrives, and a grand procession after this Swayamvara. Because in the Swayamvara, a lot of times the princess is accepted, but there is still a great wedding to be performed. So everyone gets ready, and they get all of the different ceremonial rituals ready for the wedding. And in many, many tellings, Lord Shiva arrives there in a very fearsome form, accompanied by many of his ghosts and hobgoblins and all of his followers who are in various types of forms, and seeing this fearsome retinue approaching, the Queen Mother faints. Indeed, in fact, all of the citizens and all of those in attendance begin to wonder at this fearsome contingent of ghostly beings. And Lord Shiva, in this very harsh and austere form, finally, Lord Brahma and Lord Vishnu, they begin to appease Lord Shiva. And it is Lord Vishnu who says, "Why are you troubling the family of this poor girl so much? Lord Shiva, you have the ability to take any form that you desire. Why don't you take a form more suitable to a marriage procession?" And then, within the Natya Shastras, elucidated by Bharat Muni, it is said that Lord Shiva changes his form piece by piece. He takes off his tiger skin and he wraps on a beautiful silken dhoti, which looks like it is made from the foam of the milk ocean itself. It is gleaming in its beauty. And then sometimes he wraps his tiger skin back on top of it. But he puts on a golden belt. He removes the snakes from his arms, and instead he has golden snake ornaments that are no longer fearful, and he places those upon his arms. He puts on his wrists thick bangles made of gold and jewels. He reties his matted locks within his hair, and he makes sure that they are nicely adorned. And he encircles them with garlands of rudraksha beads, but they're also gold and pearls intertwined. He lets go of his snakes as his garlands and adopts a beautiful flower garland. He has a golden sash on his shoulder, and he is Sundareshwar Mahadev, the most beautiful form. And then he reappears to marry the goddess Parvati. The Queen Mother and Himavan Raj have recovered their senses. They've regained consciousness, and now they are so happy to see this form of Sundareshwar Mahadev who will marry their princess. After marrying Parvati Devi in a grand celebration, he marks her forehead with the half moon in the shape of a bell. And she is thus known as Chandraghanta, who's marked with the moon in the shape of a bell. It is said that this bell that she also carries, the ringing of this bell is the sound of victory from the goddess Chandi or Chamundeshwari. And this sound can usher in all auspiciousness. Just the sound of her bell is enough to drive away hordes and hordes of obstacles and miseries from the path of her devotees. With the sound of that bell of victory, she can fight hordes of demons. And it is said that those who pray to her are never troubled by ghosts. They are awarded with all auspiciousness, and they are blessed with purity, strength, and courage. So her beauty bloomed as her heart expanded with love for Mahadev. Beautiful Chandraghanta, O brilliant goddess, whose face and kind, loving eyes forever attract the heart of Mahadev, the greatest of all Vaishnavas. O Vaishnavi, all glories unto you. The sound of your bell removes all inauspiciousness, and you are forever the valiant protector of your devotees. You can instill devotion in the heart and bring peace to the soul. Please guard our hearts as we journey forward on the path of bhakti. O Goddess Chandraghanta, we offer praise unto you. And that is the story of Chandraghanta Devi, who we honor by wearing white, symbolizing her gorgeous purity and her steadfastness of accepting none other than Mahadev as the Lord of her heart. Let us hope and pray that she blesses us with this same steadfastness, that we can achieve the Lord of our hearts. Let her brilliant form sit upon the lotus of our hearts and usher us closer and closer to the feet of our divine Lord. Let this divine couple, who always find some way to figure into the pastimes of Sri Krishna himself, let this divine couple, who was married in such a great ceremony, let them bless our lives and fill our lives with devotion and all auspiciousness. Let them gift us with our heart's desires, but our true heart's desires. Not the material desires, but the desires that are eternal. Those desires for devotion, those desires for divine love, those desires for transcendence, those desires for entrance into the abode of divine love. Thank you so much for being with me. Tomorrow we will speak about Kushmanda Devi, she who is able to create the universe with nothing more than a smile. That is Kushmanda Devi. So we'll hear about her tomorrow. We'll hear more exciting adventures of our divine goddess and friend, our most beautiful mentor, who is always eager to give us her blessings. Ambe Mata Ki Jai. All glories to the divine couple. All glories to Shri Radha Govinda, who have my heart and soul. All glories to all of you. Thank you for being here in these sanghas. I was reading today, Srila Prabhupada said that these sanghas where everyone comes together to hear the glories of so many pastimes is spiritual television. So that's what we're having. These are episodes of spiritual television. Thank you for joining. Thank you for making me so eager to speak by being so enthusiastic to hear. I cannot wait for tomorrow to see what we will uncover next. Until then, see you soon. Hare Krishna.